He stood at the edge of the tall grass, staring at the old wooden cabin, as if it were the last place on earth that would accept him. The wind blew across the lonely land, carrying dust, pine scent, and a hollow quiet that settled deep inside his chest. His body was strong and silent, but his spirit felt worn like an old trail. He had walked far with no plan to return, bringing only a blanket, a knife, and thoughts that no man wished to speak. He chose this cabin because it looked like a forgotten place. It's hidden from towns, soldiers, traders, and every memory that cut like a sharp stone. He wanted a place where no one would ask why he did not smile, why he kept his eyes low, or why his heart felt heavier than the mountains around him. The grass brushed against his legs as he stepped closer, thinking that this abandoned cabin was the right place to end his journey without noise or questions. The cabin leaned to one side as if tired from years of storms. The roof had many open spaces, and pieces of wood had turned gray from rain and snow. The door hung loosely, shaking whenever the wind passed through. To him it looked perfect, because broken things did not judge broken ones. He touched one of the logs and felt how dry and weak it was. The land was quiet and wide, the kind of quiet that made a man see his past like shadows moving behind him. His breath slowed as he looked at the cabin, believing he would die alone here quietly, with only the earth as his witness. He did not come to fight, argue, or hope. He only wanted peace far from the noise of the world. He pushed the door slowly, expecting dust and silence, but something stopped him. From inside, he heard the soft sound of movement, like someone shifting their weight carefully. His hand froze. He listened again. It was not an animal. It was too careful, too gentle, too human. His muscles tightened, and his heartbeat grew heavier. No one should be here, not this far from town, not inside a ruined cabin that even wild animals avoided during cold nights. His mind raced. Was it a hunter, a thief, or someone hurt? He stepped back, waiting for a sound again, wondering if he needed to leave quietly and find another place. Then he heard it clearly. A small cry. Not loud or scared, but tired and weak like a young child who did not know if comfort would come or not. His heart jumped in confusion. He looked at the door again, now torn between leaving and opening it wide. Nothing in his thoughts prepared him for the sound of a child in a place like this. The land was rough, food was hard to find, and nights were too cold for little ones. He slowly circled the cabin, instead of entering, studying the windows and broken walls. There was no sign of a campfire outside, no horse track, no lantern, no extra shoes near the entrance. It felt strange and out of place. He moved toward a side window that still had one small opening. When he peered inside, he saw a worn blanket on the floor and a woman sitting against the wall with a young baby held close to her chest. Her dress was torn, but still neat in some areas, and her hair was tied back with simple care. She looked tired, pale, and not ready to run or fight. Her eyes stared at the cabin floor, as if she had been awake for many nights, hoping for help that never arrived. He stood still for a long moment, unable to understand how she reached this ruined structure in the middle of forgotten land. He stepped toward the doorway, and when he pushed it open, she lifted her head quickly. Her arms held her baby tighter, but she did not scream. Her eyes showed fear but also hope, like someone who had reached the last piece of strength and had no choice but to trust whoever came through the door. The air between them felt heavy, not with danger, but with unanswered questions. She did not speak first, and he did not ask. Both stared, trying to understand if they were safe or about to face trouble he could not handle. He raised his empty hands slowly to show he carried no harm. Silence shaped their first moment longer than words. She finally whispered, her voice tired but steady, before asking if he planned to take the cabin away from them. He explained that he thought it was abandoned and that he came to stay alone, far from the world. She lowered her eyes as if his words were heavy but not surprising. She told him she and her child had nowhere else to go, and no one was coming for them. She did not share her full story, not yet, and he did not ask because he knew pain when he saw it. Sometimes a man did not need names or long explanations to understand that life had broken someone more than once. The wind pushed against the broken door, while both stood quiet, trying to decide what happened next. The land outside was wide, empty, and not safe for a woman with a small child. But inside the cabin, nothing felt certain either. He walked back a few steps, torn between leaving, helping, or staying with caution. His plan was to be alone, to forget, to disappear. But now he stood before someone who looked like they were holding on to life by a thin thread. He never expected that in the place he chose to die, he would find someone fighting to live. His spirit felt shaken, not by fear, but by a feeling he had not allowed himself to feel for a long time. He did not know if he should walk away and find another quiet place, or if he should stay and share a broken roof with strangers who needed protection more than he needed silence. She looked at him with eyes that asked, without words, if she should trust him. And the baby made another weak sound that felt like a tiny call from the earth itself. He stood at the doorframe, breathing slow, realizing that his fate had changed the moment he heard that first soft cry. And before either of them spoke again, he knew something inside him would not let him turn around and walk away. But helping them meant opening a part of himself he believed was gone forever. He did not know if he could do it, and she did not know if she could trust the man who arrived from nowhere. Outside, the clouds started to gather, and thunder whispered in the distance while both waited for the next move that would decide their future. He stayed near the doorway for a long moment, trying to steady his thoughts. His plan had been clear when he came to this place, but now his mind felt like a river running in two directions. The woman looked at him as if she feared he would ask her to leave, and he could see how tired her arms were from holding the child. The cabin smelled of damp wood and old smoke, and a small cold wind slipped through the broken roof. He stepped inside slowly, moving with care so she would not think he came with a threat. She held her child tighter and shifted her back against the wall as if she needed to protect what little she had left. He crouched near the corner, leaving space between them so she would not feel trapped. He did not ask her name, and she did not ask his. In that silent space, it felt like names were things that belonged to a different time, one where hope and trust were still easy to carry. He looked at the child, wrapped in a torn cloth that once must have been soft and warm. The baby's cheeks looked pale, and the skin around his eyes seemed tired, just like his mother. He wondered if they had eaten recently, or if they had walked a long way like he did. She broke the quiet with a soft voice, asking if he planned to stay. He answered that he did not know anymore. He told her this cabin was the place he had chosen for his last days because he could not find peace anywhere else. She listened with slow breaths, but her eyes did not show judgment. Everyone in this land carried scars in their hearts, and his words only proved he was no different. She said she had been hiding here for a few days because she had nowhere else to go and no one would risk helping her. She did not explain why, and he did not question it. He only asked if she had food for herself or the child, and she lowered her head, showing the truth without speaking. He reached into the small pouch tied at his side. Inside was a piece of dried meat and a few grains. It was the little he had saved for himself, but he knew she needed it more. He placed the food near her and stepped back. She hesitated before taking it, as if afraid he would change his mind or demand something in return. When she finally accepted it, she whispered a thank you that held more meaning than any long talk. She ate a small bite, and then gently placed a piece near the baby's lips. The sound of the child sucking quietly filled the cabin and gave the room a brief breath of life. Night was slowly approaching, darkening the sky through the broken roof. The wind grew colder, and she pulled the blanket tightly around her child. He could tell she feared the freezing night more than she feared him. He placed wood in the corner and started stacking it near the old stone fire pit. She watched him silently, unsure of his intentions. With careful hands, he used a small ember stone he always carried, striking until a weak glow caught on dry grass. Soon a small flame grew inside the old fireplace, spreading warmth across the room. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the comfort touch her face like something she had almost forgotten. They sat across from each other, quiet but aware of every movement. She finally said she once had a home far from this wild land, near a small town where people spoke kindly when life was calm and food was plenty, but when trouble came, kindness disappeared like smoke in heavy wind. She did not say exactly what happened, only that she had been forced to leave with her child when no one wanted to stand with her. She did not describe who she ran from or why, but her trembling voice revealed it was not something she wished to remember. Her baby was all she had left, and she would rather risk the unknown than surrender to the danger behind her. He listened, feeling the familiar weight of sorrow settle inside, because her story reminded him of his own pain that brought him here. His village was gone, broken by conflict that rose between two worlds that did not understand each other. He had survived when many did not, and even though his body stayed strong, his spirit carried the memories of fire, fear, and loss. He left his people because he could no longer watch the land fill with graves. He believed a man could walk away from memories if he walked far enough, but even here the pain followed. He knew now that he came to the cabin to disappear, but life placed someone in his path who needed protection as much as he needed a reason to stay alive. Outside, wolves howled in the distance, echoing through the trees. She held her baby tight and looked toward the door with fear. He reassured her that wolves did not come near smoke and fire if they smelled a strong human presence. Still, she did not relax fully. She had lived with fear long enough to know danger could come in many forms, even ones with soft voices. He wished he could tell her she was safe now, but he could not promise safety in a world where life changed fast with no warning. As the fire warmed the room, she slowly closed her eyes, her body leaning to one side, fighting sleep. The baby rested against her chest, finally quiet. He watched them, realizing they had not slept properly in a long time. He stayed awake to keep guard, his eyes fixed on the door, listening to the wind and distant sounds. He felt a strange pull inside, a sense of responsibility he did not expect. He was a man ready to die alone, but now his spirit would not let him turn his back on them. The night passed slowly. He did not sleep, and neither did his thoughts. When morning light entered through the broken roof, she woke suddenly, as if expecting someone to burst inside. Her first act was to check the baby, making sure he was still breathing and warm. She looked at him, noticing he had not slept either. She asked if he planned to leave now that morning came. He stayed silent for a moment, not knowing how to answer. He told her he came here to end his journey, but now things were different. She lowered her head, telling him she did not want to be a burden. He replied that she and her child were alive and that life should not be thrown away, like old wood left to rot in rain. He suggested they search for water nearby and look for berries or anything useful. Her face showed a small spark of hope, though she tried to hide it. She offered to help, but he asked her to stay inside with the child until he checked the land for danger. She hesitated, afraid he might not come back, but she nodded because she had no other choice. He stepped outside, breathing the cool morning air, feeling like the cabin no longer belonged to death but to something unknown that still needed to unfold. He walked toward a small creek he thought he had seen earlier. The land was quiet, but quiet did not always mean safe. As he reached the water, he knelt down to fill a small container. While he did, he noticed something near the mud on the opposite side. Tracks, not animal tracks. Boot tracks. Fresh ones. His heart tightened as he studied them, knowing they did not match his own steps nor hers. Someone had been nearby recently, maybe still watching, maybe searching, and he could not tell if they came with kindness or trouble. The sound of the creek mixed with the wind as he stood slowly, gripping his knife, and realized the cabin was no longer just a refuge for 3 lost souls. Someone else knew this land was not as empty as it seemed. He followed the boot tracks with slow steps, studying the shape and the depth. They were not made by someone passing lightly through the woods. Whoever walked here moved with purpose, pushing deep into the ground as if carrying a heavy load or searching for something important. He crouched down, brushing his fingers along the edge of the print. The soil was still soft from morning dew, which meant the tracks were fresh, made at dawn, or even moments before he arrived. His chest tightened as he imagined a stranger watching the cabin from the trees. Waiting for the right moment to step forward, he lifted his head and scanned the woods. The trees stood still, tall and silent, but he felt eyes hidden somewhere between the branches. The wind pushed through the leaves in a long breath, masking smaller sounds that might reveal movement. He gripped the knife at his waist, not because he wanted violence, but because danger had a habit of arriving without warning in these forgotten parts of the frontier. He filled the water container quickly and headed back toward the cabin, keeping to the brush, moving like someone who did not want to be seen. When he reached the edge of the clearing, he stopped to watch. The cabin looked the same, worn and broken, leaning into the tall grass. Smoke from the small fire inside drifted through the gaps in the roof. Nothing seemed disturbed, but his instincts told him the peace was only on the surface. He stepped forward, careful not to make noise, then entered. She stood near the fireplace, holding her baby, as if she felt something wrong in the air even before he returned. She asked him why he looked troubled. He paused before answering. He did not want to frighten her, but he could not lie either. He told her someone else had been near the creek, someone wearing heavy boots. Her face turned pale, and she held her child closer. She said the people she had escaped from wore boots like that, and they had been searching for her since the day she left. She never explained exactly what they wanted, only that she had trusted the wrong person and found herself in a place where she and her child were treated like property, not people. She had run after gathering her courage for many nights, and she believed they would chase her until she had no breath left. He asked if she thought they had found her trail. She nodded slowly, her eyes dark with worry. She said she tried to cover her tracks, walking through streams and staying off open paths, but the child slowed her down. Once she reached this cabin, she hoped the broken roof and rotten logs would make it look unlivable. She believed no one would check inside, but now she understood that hiding was never a permanent answer. She feared they would take her child if they found them, or worse, punish her for running. He did not promise safety, but he told her he would not let anyone harm them while he was here. She looked at him with a mixture of hope and disbelief, as if she did not expect someone carrying so much pain to still care for a stranger. He placed the water near her and looked around the cabin, thinking of ways to make it safer. The wood was weak, and the door could be pushed open with one strong shove. The windows offered no real protection. Even the firelight might reveal their presence at night. He realized the cabin was not a shelter, but a temporary shadow in a land full of threats. He told her they needed a plan, and she nodded, though her hands shook. She asked if they should leave the cabin and move deeper into the wild. He considered the idea, but knew traveling with a child while being hunted was dangerous. He said they needed to learn who made those tracks, whether it was one man or many, and how close they were willing to come. She swallowed hard, asking if he planned to confront whoever was searching. He said he would watch first, not fight. A man who acted without thinking often fell before he had the chance to defend anything. As they spoke, the baby whimpered softly. She rocked him gently, whispering comfort in a trembling voice. The sound made him remember the families he once knew, the laughter of small children in his village before peace was taken from them. He had not expected to hear such a sound again, or to feel the weight of protecting a life that was not his own. The memory made his heart ache, but it also strengthened his resolve. This mother and child had been pushed into a dark corner of the world, and he could not let fear swallow them. Later, he stepped outside again, needing to watch the land. The sun was rising higher, casting long shadows behind the trees. He walked the perimeter quietly, studying the grass for signs of movement. In one area near the brush, he noticed a branch had been bent downward. Someone had used it for balance, or leaned against it, watching the clearing. He moved slowly toward the trees and found another clue. A piece of cloth caught on a thorn. Brown fabric, rough, and likely from a work coat. Freshly torn, he pulled it off the thorn and hid it in his hand. He did not hear footsteps, but he sensed he was not alone. A shift in the wind carried a faint scent of tobacco and sweat, not from his own clothes. He knew someone had been watching them recently, maybe even while the woman slept. He walked back to the cabin with steady steps and told her they had only a short time before trouble found them. She asked if they should pack what little they had, but he shook his head. He said leaving too soon would expose them on the open trail. They needed to prepare, but wait for the right moment. She asked him what he saw outside before she arrived at the cabin. She wanted to understand why a man like him came to such a lonely place to die. His eyes darkened, and he sat near the fire as he told her a part of his story. He said he had lost his people, his home, and the life he once knew. He said he walked for weeks with a heart too heavy to carry, and chose this cabin because he thought it would be the last place anyone would disturb. He said he believed his journey was ending until he heard her child cry inside the cabin. She listened quietly, her face softening. She said she did not know why their paths crossed, but she believed fate sometimes placed broken souls together for reasons too deep to see. He did not answer, though her words stayed with him longer than he expected. He kept thinking of the boot tracks near the creek. Whoever made them would return. The land was too quiet for them to disappear without a trace. As the day passed, went outside again and again, studying the woods from different angles. Each time, he felt the same tension under the surface, as if the trees were holding secrets. The wind carried shifting scents, and birds flew in short bursts as if disturbed. Something was moving out there, watching them without coming close enough to be seen. Inside the cabin, she fed her baby the last pieces of food he had shared. She tried to stay calm, but he could see the fear growing behind her quiet movements. She asked him what would happen if the men found them. He told her the truth. There might be more than one. They might come at night or morning. They might be armed. She asked if he could fight them off. He said he would try, but a single knife and an old cabin were not enough to guarantee survival. Still, he promised he would not abandon them. She looked at him with a softness that made his chest tighten again. For the first time since he came to the cabin, he felt like he was no longer waiting for death. He was waiting for something else, something uncertain but alive. As evening approached, he stepped outside one last time to check the land before darkness. The sky grew orange, casting long shadows over the clearing. He walked toward the edge of the woods and stopped suddenly. A sound broke the silence. A twig snapped somewhere deep between the trees. He lowered his body, moving like a hunter. Then he heard another sound. A breath, a foot shifting on leaves. Someone was out there. Closer than before, he stared into the dark trees and saw a shape move between two trunks, just for a moment. A man, watching. He gripped his knife, breath steady and quiet. Knowing the conflict he feared was no longer approaching, it had already. Eris stepped back slowly, making sure the man in the trees did not notice that he had been seen. His heart beat harder, not out of fear, but out of awareness that every second mattered now. The sky dimmed as the last light of day slipped behind the tall pines, and with it came a growing silence that felt heavier than before. He did not turn his back to the woods until he reached the cabin door. When he stepped inside, she looked at him right away, as though she sensed something had shifted outside. He whispered that someone was close, closer than before, and her arms tightened around her child until the baby let out a soft cry. He told her to stay near the back wall, where the shadows were deep, away from the windows and the door. She nodded, though her hands trembled. He checked the small fire and lowered the flame so it would not glow too bright and reveal movement inside. The cabin grew dim, and the cold crept in again, but darkness was safer than light. He stood by the door, staring at the cracks between the logs, watching the field and the tree line where he last saw movement. Every sway of grass, every rustle of branches made his grip tighten around the old knife handle. She whispered that the baby could not stay quiet for long. The child would soon need warmth, food, and comfort. He knew she was right, and he hated that all he could offer was silence and caution. He told her they would wait until full darkness, then watch for any sound before deciding the next move. She asked if they could run once the moon rose, but he shook his head. Running in the dark with a child was risky. They could fall, get lost, or lead the hunters directly to them. The wind outside became colder, forming long whistles around the broken roof. The night felt endless, and neither of them dared to sleep. Hours passed slowly. The baby grew restless, whimpering in small, short breaths. She rocked him carefully, pressing her cheek to his head, trying to soothe without sound. His eyes stayed fixed on the dark outside. He felt something he had not expected, something unfamiliar yet heavy. Responsibility, not forced upon him, but born naturally, like a spark in dry grass that refused to die out. Suddenly, he heard another faint sound outside. A low voice, maybe two, speaking in a quiet tone as if not wanting to attract attention. He could not understand every word, but he heard searching, direction, and determination. The tone alone proved these were not travelers passing by. These were men following a trail. He motioned for her to stay silent and moved closer to the cracks again. The moon had risen now, giving enough light to see shapes outside. He spotted two men near the brush, bending down to examine the grass, likely noticing where he had walked earlier. He noticed one of them holding something long, maybe a stick or a weapon. The other scanned the cabin roof, squinting as if trying to see movement inside. They moved with slow caution, like men who believed they were close to what they were searching for. He whispered to her that there were two, maybe more, and they would come when they were fully sure. Fear filled her eyes, but she did not panic. She had lived through fear before, enough to know that silent breaths could save a life. She asked him what they should do, and he told her they needed to prepare without making noise. He told her to gather anything light and useful, but she had almost nothing beyond the child and the blanket. A thought crossed his mind, one he had tried to avoid. The cabin could not protect them, but it could be used to guide the situation. If the men believed the cabin was empty, they might search somewhere else, or at least lower their guard. He studied the broken boards and realized they could slip out through a rear gap in the logs if they moved quietly enough. He checked the space with his hands, pulling loose pieces without sound until there was just enough room for her and the baby to slide through. He held her arm gently and whispered that she must trust him, no matter how hard it felt. She looked into his eyes, searching for certainty. She asked if he planned to stay behind alone. He did not answer directly. Instead, he reminded her that she and her child were the ones meant to survive, not him. She shook her head, saying she would not leave him behind to face danger alone. Her voice cracked when she said that she owed him her life already, and she could not bear the thought of losing the only person who had shown kindness when the world turned against her. Her words struck him deeper than she could see. He had spent many months believing his life held no purpose, but now she was telling him he mattered. He felt something stirring inside, something stronger than sorrow. He could not promise he would survive, but he promised he would not abandon them either. Outside, the voices faded for a moment, replaced by footsteps circling toward the side of the cabin. He checked the small opening again, making sure it was clear. The night air seeped through, cold and sharp. The moonlight touched the grass beyond, showing a faint, narrow trail leading toward thicker trees. He whispered that once the time came, they would slip out through that opening and move silently through the tall grass. She nodded, clutching her baby close, though tears shone in the dim light. Minutes passed like hours. The voices outside grew louder again. Someone tapped the cabin wall with the tip of a boot, as if checking if anyone moved inside. Another voice suggested going around to search for prints. They were too close now to risk waiting longer. He signaled to her with his hand, and she lowered herself to the floor near the opening. He helped her ease through, careful that the wood did not scrape or pop. Once she slipped through, she held out her arms so he could hand the baby to her without noise. She cradled the child under the blanket and crouched low in the grass waiting for him. He breathed slowly, ready to follow, but before he stepped through, he heard the cabin door handle creak slightly, as if someone tested whether it was locked. He froze and turned back, realizing that if he crawled out now, the noise or movement might give them away. He moved quickly to the far corner, knocked a loose board with his foot, and let it drop lightly. The sound drew attention toward the inside, giving the impression that someone was hiding deep in the cabin. He then slipped through the opening outside, moving low and silent, joining her without a word. They crawled through the grass, keeping close to the earth. The night air smelled of soil and pine. The baby stirred but did not cry, and she stroked his back with steady fingers. They moved toward the trees where shadows were thickest. Once they reached the first row of branches, they hid behind the trunk of an old pine. He peered back toward the cabin. The door had been pushed open now, and one man held a lantern while another scanned the room with sharp eyes. Their silhouettes moved slowly, as if expecting someone to attack or hide. She whispered, asking what they should do next. He scanned the woods, thinking of paths that offered cover. He remembered a rocky ridge he passed earlier, One where grass grew thick enough to hide footprints and stones made it hard for trackers to follow scent. Ack! He told her they needed to move toward that ridge, but they needed to do it slowly and without panic. She whispered that she trusted him completely. Her voice was soft but sincere, and it gave him unexpected strength. They rose to a crouch, stepping carefully between tall weeds. Every sound felt like it might betray them. The cold night wrapped around their bodies, and the grass brushed against their clothes. He listened for movement behind them, could still hear the men talking inside the cabin, trying to decide if someone had recently been there or if they were imagining things. When they reached the trees and deeper shadows, paused to look back one more time. The cabin stood small and silent, broken and lonely, like a place that once saw sorrow and might never see peace again. But as they turned toward the ridge, he felt a faint glow inside his chest. Maybe this journey was no longer about death. Maybe it was about protection, purpose, and something that could lead both of them toward a different ending. He led her up the narrow path, guiding her steps so she wouldn't stumble. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of voices again, but now they were farther away. She held her baby close and walked with steady courage, trusting a man she barely knew, because in a world full of danger, trust could sometimes save more than strength. They reached the ridge, where the rocks rose like silent guards, blocking moonlight and forming deep shadows. He told her to rest behind a fallen tree while he checked the land. She sat down slowly, breathing carefully so the baby would not wake with noise. She looked at him and whispered that she was scared, but not hopeless anymore. He nodded, knowing that hope was a powerful thing, even when danger stood close enough to breathe the same night air. He moved ahead, watching the dark trail, every sense awake. The conflict was not over, it was only growing. But something inside him refused to quit now. Something worth fighting for had finally appeared. Is this conversation helpful so far? They crawled through the grass, keeping close to the earth. The night air smelled of soil and pine. The baby stirred but did not cry, and she stroked his back with steady fingers. They moved toward the trees where shadows were thickest. Once they reached the first row of branches, they hid behind the trunk of an old pine. He peered back toward the cabin. The door had been pushed open now, and one man held a lantern while another scanned the room with sharp eyes. Their silhouettes moved slowly, as if expecting someone to attack or hide. She whispered, asking what they should do next. He scanned the woods, thinking of paths that offered cover. He remembered a rocky ridge he passed earlier. One where grass grew thick enough to hide footprints and stones made it hard for trackers to follow scent. He told her they needed to move toward that ridge, but they needed to do it slowly and without panic. She whispered that she trusted him completely. Her voice was soft but sincere, and it gave him unexpected strength. They rose to a crouch, stepping carefully between tall weeds. Every sound felt like it might betray them. The cold night wrapped around their bodies, and the grass brushed against their clothes. He listened for movement behind them. He could still hear the men talking inside the cabin, trying to decide if someone had recently been there or if they were imagining things. When they reached the trees and deeper shadows, he paused to look back one more time. The cabin stood small and silent, broken and lonely, like a place that once saw sorrow and might never see peace again. But as they turned toward the ridge, he felt a faint glow inside his chest. Maybe this journey was no longer about death. Maybe it was about protection, purpose, and something that could lead both of them toward a different ending. He led her up the narrow path, guiding her steps so she wouldn't stumble. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of voices again, but now they were farther away. She held her baby close and walked with steady courage, trusting a man she barely knew, because in a world full of danger, trust could sometimes save more than strength. They reached the ridge, where the rocks rose like silent guards, blocking moonlight and forming deep shadows. He told her to rest behind a fallen tree while he checked the land. She sat down slowly, breathing carefully so the baby would not wake with noise. She looked at him and whispered that she was scared but not hopeless anymore. He nodded, knowing that hope was a powerful thing, even when danger stood close enough to breathe the same night air. He moved ahead, watching the dark trail, every sense awake. The conflict was not over. It was only growing. But something inside him refused to quit now. Something worth fighting for. It finally appeared. Is this conversation helpful so far?